The crowd inside the crystal arena was restless, their voices echoing against the tall, glowing walls. Above them, a giant screen displayed the faces of the chosen competitors. Most were tall, scaled warriors with shining armor and weapons that pulsed with alien energy. And then there was one face that made the crowd laugh, a human named Daniel. He stood there in plain combat gear, looking more like a man who had wandered into the wrong place than someone ready to fight for his life. Daniel had been brought to this alien city by accident, or so he thought. His ship had been pulled out of space by a tractor beam, and before he could figure out what was happening, he was thrown into the royal court of the Kavar dynasty. The throne room had been dazzling, but what caught his attention was the princess herself. Tall, elegant, with silver hair that shimmered in the light and eyes the color of burning gold, she studied him with a curious smile before speaking in a voice that carried through the hall. "If this human survives our trials, I'll marry him." The room had burst into laughter. Even the guards chuckled. To them, it was a joke. No human had ever survived the trials. They were designed to kill even the strongest alien warriors, but Daniel, standing there with his heart pounding, had not laughed. He had looked at her and seen something in her eyes. Not mockery, but a challenge. Now, standing in the arena, he could still hear her words in his head. The trials were about to start. 7 stages of danger, each more deadly than the last. And the first one was already rising from the arena floor, a massive, 8-legged beast covered in armor-like plates. Its jaws dripped with glowing venom, and its roar shook the air. The announcer's voice boomed over the crowd. "First trial, the Fangborn of Valtor." Daniel's hands tightened on his weapon, a strange hybrid of spear and blade that the guards had given him. It was heavier than anything he'd used before, and his arms ached already. He glanced at the other competitors, 3 alien warriors in the ring with him. They moved like trained killers, forming a circle around the beast. Daniel stayed back, watching. The Fangborn lunged at the nearest alien, its armored legs moving faster than expected. A swipe of its claw sent the warrior flying into the wall. The crowd roared with approval. The other 2 moved in, slashing and striking, but their blades barely scratched its armor. Daniel saw something they didn't. The underside of the beast's neck had a small gap between plates. It was quick, but it was there. He took a deep breath and ran forward. One of the warriors shouted something at him in their language, but Daniel ignored it. The Fangborn turned toward him, its massive head lowering. The stench of its breath hit him like a wall. It lunged. Daniel dropped to his knees, sliding under the creature's snapping jaws. He jammed the spear upward into the gap he had seen. The beast shrieked, its body twisting violently. Daniel was thrown clear, rolling across the arena floor. The crowd gasped. For a moment, the Fangborn staggered, then collapsed with a heavy thud. Silence fell. Then the arena exploded with noise. The announcer's voice shouted over it all. "The human has slain the Fangborn." Up in the royal balcony, the princess leaned forward, her golden eyes locked on Daniel. There was no laughter now, only surprise. Daniel stood slowly, breathing hard, his clothes covered in dust and glowing venom. He looked up at her and allowed himself the smallest smirk. The announcer continued. 1 stage complete. 6 remain. The gates to the next stage opened, revealing a narrow tunnel lit with eerie blue flames. The surviving competitors, 2 aliens and Daniel, were herded toward it. As they walked, one of the alien warriors glanced at him with a mix of respect and suspicion. "You fight well for a soft skin," he said in broken galactic standard. Daniel just nodded. Inside the tunnel, the air was cooler. Strange whispers echoed around them, though no one was speaking. Daniel felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. They reached a wide chamber with a floor of shifting tiles. Symbols glowed on each one, but the light flickered dangerously. The announcer's voice boomed again. "Second trial. The path of illusions. Step wrong and fall forever." Daniel's eyes scanned the tiles. Some were steady, some unstable. But it wasn't just the floor. Shapes moved in the shadows, whispers tempting him to take the wrong step. The aliens hesitated, testing the tiles with their weapons. One of them stepped forward, and the tile under his foot cracked open, revealing a bottomless void. He barely jumped back in time. Daniel swallowed hard. This wasn't just about strength. It was about focus, observation, and nerves of steel. And somewhere high above, the princess was still watching. He knew one thing. If he wanted to survive this, he couldn't afford a single mistake. The chamber felt alive. The air carried a strange hum, as if the walls themselves were breathing. The glowing tiles beneath their feet shifted in color, flickering from steady white to a dangerous crimson. The void between them was pure black, deep enough to swallow light. Every step could mean survival, or instant death. Daniel kept his breathing steady. He remembered something from his time on Earth, a survival lesson about staying calm under pressure. Panic made people clumsy. Clumsy here meant dead. He crouched, studying the tiles, watching the rhythm of their glow. He noticed that some flashed red before breaking apart. Those were the traps. Others stayed white and steady for longer. That was the path. The alien warrior beside him grunted. "Move, human. We do not have all day." Daniel ignored the insult. He took a step forward onto a steady tile. The stone groaned under his weight but held. He looked back at the two aliens still on the starting platform. "Follow me, but step where I step," he said firmly. One of them scoffed, but the other nodded. They followed. Step by step, Daniel led them, never rushing, always watching for the deadly flicker of red. But the trial wasn't going to let them pass so easily. From the shadows above, strange creatures began to emerge. Long, snake-like, forms with glowing eyes and sharp needle teeth. They coiled around the pillars, hissing. One dropped from above, landing on a tile just behind Daniel. The alien behind him shouted in warning. Daniel spun, swinging his spear in a wide arc. The blade caught the creature mid-body, cutting it clean in two. The tiles under its corpse crumbled, taking the body into the void below. The remaining snakes circled them, waiting for a mistake. Daniel realized what was happening. The snakes weren't there to kill them directly. They were there to make them panic and step wrong. He tightened his grip on the spear. "Don't look at them. Watch the tiles," he called out. The last section of the path was the trickiest. The tiles began to move, sliding left and right like pieces of a puzzle. Daniel waited for two to align, then leapt across, landing hard but safe. The others followed. One alien almost slipped, his foot hitting the edge of a crumbling tile. But Daniel grabbed his arm and yanked him forward before it gave way. They made it to the other side. The moment Daniel's boots touched solid ground, the tiles behind them shattered and fell into darkness. The snakes hissed before slithering back into the shadows. The announcer's voice echoed, "Second trial complete. 5 remain." The gates ahead opened with a deep rumble. Beyond them lay a massive open arena under an alien sky filled with swirling storms. The ground was cracked, and streams of glowing blue liquid flowed through the trenches. Strange stone monoliths jutted from the earth like jagged teeth. In the center stood a towering figure, a challenger unlike anything Daniel had seen before. It was a humanoid, but easily twice his height, with dark metallic skin and burning white eyes. In one hand it held a massive warhammer. The announcer's voice boomed again. "Third trial. Defeat the Guardian of the Storm." The alien warriors stiffened. Even they seemed nervous. Daniel's stomach tightened. This was no beast. This was an intelligent opponent. The Guardian's gaze swept over them before settling on Daniel. It raised its hammer and struck the ground. A shockwave rippled out, knocking the smaller alien off his feet. Daniel ducked behind one of the stone monoliths as the Guardian charged. The ground shook with every step. He knew he couldn't block a hit from that hammer. It would shatter him. He had to move, stay light, and wait for an opening. The Guardian swung at the larger alien warrior who barely managed to parry with his own blade. The clash sent sparks flying. Daniel circled behind, looking for a weak point. The metal skin seemed impenetrable, but as the Guardian turned, Daniel saw small vents along its back glowing faintly. He sprinted forward, using a low trench as cover. As the Guardian raised its hammer to crush the other alien, Daniel leapt onto its back, driving his spear into one of the glowing vents. The Guardian roared in pain, spinning wildly to throw him off. Daniel held on until the spear snapped. He was flung into the dirt, rolling hard. The other alien seized the moment, driving his blade into the same vent. The Guardian staggered, then dropped to one knee. Daniel forced himself to his feet, grabbing the broken half of his spear. With a shout, he drove it into the final vent at the base of the Guardian's neck. The giant froze. Then, slowly, it fell forward, crashing into the ground with a thunderous boom. The arena fell silent for a heartbeat. Then the crowd erupted in cheers. From the royal balcony, the princess leaned back in her chair, watching him with an unreadable expression. This time there was no mocking smile, just interest, maybe even respect. The announcer's voice rang out once more. The human survives again. 4 trials remain. Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow. He was still breathing hard, but he could feel something shifting. The crowd's laughter had changed to curiosity. And the princess's joke didn't feel like a joke anymore. The gates to the next stage creaked open, revealing a dark corridor lit by soft golden light. The roar of the crowd faded as Daniel and the 2 surviving alien warriors stepped inside. The air felt warmer here, almost comfortable, but the quiet was heavy. Too heavy. Daniel's instincts told him that this was not going to be a fight of strength, but something far more dangerous. The corridor led them into a wide chamber. At its center stood a circular platform with 3 raised pedestals. On one pedestal rested a crystal sphere glowing with gentle blue light. On another lay a heavy iron key. And on the third was a small cage containing something that made Daniel's chest tighten. A frightened child, no older than 7, with deep green skin and wide, terrified eyes. The announcer's voice echoed above them. 3rd trial, the trial of choice. You may take only one. Choose wisely, for what you leave behind will be lost forever. Daniel glanced at the other warriors. One of them looked at the crystal sphere with greed. The other's eyes locked on the key. No one moved. Toward the cage, Daniel frowned. That's a kid, he said sharply, stepping toward the pedestal. The taller alien sneered. A decoy. They use illusions here. The sphere is power, the key is freedom. Only fools waste a choice on a trick. Daniel looked closer. The child's hands gripped the bars tightly and tears streamed down her cheeks. If it was an illusion, it was a cruel one. He crouched so his eyes were level with hers. Hey, can you hear me? He asked gently. She nodded, a shaky breath escaping her. Please help me, she whispered. That was enough. Daniel didn't care if it was a trap. He reached out, lifted the cage from the pedestal and tucked it under his arm. The other warriors muttered insults as they each claimed their prizes, the crystal sphere and the iron key. The moment all 3 choices were taken, the floor beneath them split into 3 separate paths, each sealed off from the others. Daniel found himself alone in a narrow tunnel, the child still in the cage. The path was dimly lit by glowing moss on the walls. As Daniel walked, the ground began to tilt, making him stumble. The air filled with a low hum, and then the walls shifted, closing in behind him. He quickened his pace, searching for a way out. A shadow moved ahead. From the darkness stepped a tall, cloaked figure with glowing white eyes. You chose the burden, it said in a deep voice. Now see if you can carry it. The figure extended a long black blade and lunged. Daniel twisted away, still clutching the cage. He couldn't fight properly without setting it down. But the thought of leaving the child defenseless made his jaw tighten. The cloaked figure struck again, forcing Daniel to duck and roll. Put it down and you live, the voice hissed. Daniel ignored it. Instead, he shifted the cage to his left arm and drew the broken half of his spear with his right. The figure moved fast, but Daniel used the narrow tunnel to his advantage, forcing it into close quarters where the long blade was harder to swing. He feinted left, then thrust upward, catching the figure under its chin. The strike didn't kill it, but it staggered back, hissing in pain. Daniel didn't wait. He shoved past, running forward until the tunnel opened into another chamber. A beam of golden light poured down from above, and in its center stood a tall gate covered in ancient symbols. The cage in his arm began to glow, and the bars melted away, leaving the child free. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with awe. "You passed," she said softly. "They said no one ever chooses me." Before Daniel could ask what she meant, she stepped into the beam of light and vanished. Tatir. Gate opened. Daniel stepped through, finding himself back in the main arena. The other warriors were already there, holding their prizes high for the crowd to see. The announcer's voice rang out. "The human has passed the trial of choice." The crowd's cheers were louder than before. On the royal balcony, the princess leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. Her golden eyes studied him with a strange mix of curiosity and warmth. When Daniel glanced up, she tilted her head slightly, as if acknowledging his choice. For the first time, Daniel wondered if she had placed that child there on purpose. The announcer's voice boomed again. 3 trials remain. The gates to the next stage opened and a hot wind blew into the arena, carrying the scent of ash and fire. Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon. Whatever was coming next, it was going to be worse than anything so far, and he could feel that the princess was watching even more closely now. The heat hit Daniel like a wall the moment he stepped through the gates. The arena floor had transformed into a blackened wasteland, dotted with rivers of glowing lava that bubbled and hissed. The sky above was a deep, angry red, and chunks of molten rock fell from the air like fiery rain. The ground shook every few seconds as if the entire place was alive and breathing fire. The announcer's voice echoed over the roar of the flames. 4th trial. Survive the wasteland of fire and claim the flame core. Daniel spotted the flame core immediately. It was a large crystal glowing with bright orange light, resting inside a cracked stone altar far across the lava fields. But getting there wouldn't be simple. The only paths were narrow ridges of rock that twisted and split, some crumbling under the heat. Worse, he could see movement, creatures, black as coal, crawling along the walls like giant spiders, their eyes burning like embers. The 2 surviving alien warriors stepped up beside him. The taller one smirked. "Try to keep up, human." Without waiting, he leapt onto the first ridge, his heavy boots sending sparks into the air. The other followed, their movements quick and practiced. Daniel took a deep breath and started after them. The heat made his skin prickle, sweat pouring down his back. His boots stuck slightly to the molten rock with every step. He kept his balance, eyes scanning for the best footholds. A loud hiss came from above. One of the black spider creatures dropped down, landing between Daniel and the others. It lunged at the smaller alien, its claws slashing. The alien stumbled, almost falling into the lava, but Daniel reacted instantly. He swung the broken half of his spear, striking the creature across its face. It screeched, rearing back. Daniel kicked it hard, sending it tumbling into the molten river below. The smaller alien grunted, giving him a quick nod before running ahead. Daniel followed, but every step felt like the heat was trying to pull him down. His lungs burned with each breath. As they reached the halfway point, the ground shuddered violently. A massive shape began to rise from one of the lava pools, a creature made of pure molten rock, its body glowing like a living volcano. The crowd roared in excitement. From somewhere high above, the announcer's voice thundered, "The guardian of the wasteland has awakened." The molten giant turned toward them, molten cracks running down its arms. It slammed a fist into the ridge, sending a wave of heat and shards of stone flying. The taller alien leapt back just in time, but part of the path crumbled away, cutting Daniel off from the others. He was trapped on a narrow section of rock with the giant closing in. The heat was unbearable, the air shimmering around him. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't fight this thing head-on, not with just a broken spear. But he noticed something. When the giant moved, parts of its body cooled and hardened into dark rock before heating again. Those dark spots looked brittle. Daniel waited until the giant raised its arm for another strike. Just before the fist came down, he leapt to the side, landing on a smaller ledge. As the arm slammed into the rock, one of the brittle spots cracked, open, exposing a molten core inside. Daniel didn't think. He jumped back, drove his spear into the weak point, and twisted hard. The giant let out a deep, echoing roar, its body shuddering. Molten rock spilled from the wound, splashing into the lava below. Daniel used the distraction to run, leaping across the broken ridges toward the altar. The two aliens were already there, fending off more spider creatures. The taller one had the flame core in his hands, but as soon as he touched it, the ground split apart beneath him. The stone gave way and he fell toward the lava, until Daniel grabbed his arm at the last second. With a sharp pull, he hauled the alien back to safety. For a moment, the alien just stared at him, breathing hard. Then he handed Daniel the flame core without a word. They made the final jump together, landing on solid ground just as the molten giant let out one last roar and collapsed into the lava. The arena floor began to shift again, the rivers of fire fading, the heat cooling to a bearable warmth. When they emerged into the main arena, the crowd was louder than ever. The announcer's voice boomed, "The human claims the flame core, 2 trials remain." Up on the balcony, the princess leaned forward with a faint smile. This time, there was no mockery at all, only interest. Her eyes followed Daniel as he stood there, chest heaving, the flame core glowing in his hands. And for a moment he thought he saw the smallest hint of pride in her gaze. Daniel didn't know what the last 2 trials would bring, but he knew one thing. He was no longer just surviving for himself. He was proving something to the crowd, to the princess, and maybe even to himself. The arena gates opened again, but this time a wall of cool, damp air rushed out. Mist curled along the ground, and the scent of salt filled Daniel's lungs. He stepped forward and froze. The floor ahead had vanished, replaced by a vast, dark ocean. The surface was eerily still, but somewhere deep below, faint lights moved like drifting stars. On the far side, lit by a single beam of pale light, was the goal, a tall spire of coral-like stone. At its tip rested a silver orb glowing faintly blue. The announcer's voice rang out, "5th trial, the abyss of tidal shadows. Reach the spire and claim the Pearl of Depths." A long platform extended out over the water, lined with strange harnesses and tanks. The smaller alien warrior grabbed one without hesitation. "Breathers," he muttered, strapping a device over his mouth and chest. Daniel picked one up, feeling the smooth metal and glass tubes. It fit snugly over his face, hissing softly as it activated. The moment he stepped off the platform and into the water, the world changed. The cold wrapped around him, slowing his movements. Faint shafts of light from above cut through the darkness, but beyond that was only endless blue. The other alien swam ahead, fast and sure, while Daniel kept close behind. Shapes moved in the distance, long, sleek bodies gliding through the shadows. Their eyes glowed faint green, and their movements were too smooth to be harmless. They swam lower, following a faint path of glowing plants. The water grew darker, colder. Daniel could feel pressure building in his ears. The spire loomed ahead now, jagged and sharp. But something was wrong. The faint lights he'd seen earlier weren't plants. They were eyes. From behind the spire, massive shapes emerged, creatures like a cross between sharks and eels, their mouths lined with rows of needle-like teeth. The announcer's voice echoed faintly, even underwater. "Beware the abyss predators. They hunt by sensing movement." The smaller alien tried to dart past one, but the predator spun with unnatural speed, snapping its jaws. The alien barely escaped, a tear in his leg armor trailing bubbles of air. Daniel gripped his spear, heart pounding. If they moved too fast, they'd be torn apart. He remembered something, how some Earth predators reacted to distractions. Slowly, Daniel pulled a small tool from his belt, one the alien guards had given him earlier. It sparked faintly underwater. He tossed it into the distance. The flash and vibration drew 2 of the predators away instantly. "Go," Daniel motioned, swimming toward the spire. They reached its base, where the coral surface was slick and sharp. Climbing was harder underwater, the current pushing them back. Daniel gritted his teeth, forcing himself upward. A shadow moved below, the largest predator yet, its body almost as long as the spire itself. It surged upward, jaws open. Daniel kicked hard, shoving the smaller alien out of its path. The creature's teeth scraped against the spire, sending a deep vibration through the water. Daniel drove his spear into its eye, twisting hard. The beast recoiled, thrashing wildly before retreating into the depths. He hauled himself the last few meters up the spire, reaching the glowing orb. The moment his fingers closed around it, the water around them seemed to shudder. The predators, scattered, melting into the dark. A sudden pull yanked Daniel upward. The surface broke and he gasped for air, the orb still in his grasp. The alien warrior surfaced beside him, clutching his wounded leg but alive. They were pulled onto the platform by arena guards. The crowd's roar hit Daniel like a wave. The announcer's voice boomed, "The human claims the Pearl of Depths. One trial remains." Daniel looked up at the royal balcony. The princess was standing now, her hands resting lightly on the railing. Her golden eyes were locked on him, and for the first time there was no mystery in her gaze, only something, fierce and focused, as if she had decided on something important. Daniel didn't know what the final trial would be, but he could feel it. This last challenge wouldn't just decide if he lived. It would decide whether her joke about marrying him stayed a joke or became her truth. The arena was silent when Daniel stepped back through the gates. The roar of the crowd from the last trial had faded into a tense, expectant hush. The air was cooler now, and a soft golden light washed over the stone floor. There were no lava, rivers, no beasts, no traps. Only a single raised platform in the center, surrounded by a shimmering energy field. The announcer's voice echoed, deeper than before. "Sixth and final trial, the duel of honor." Daniel's eyes narrowed. A duel meant another fighter. He looked around for his opponent. Then the crowd began to murmur, and from the royal balcony, someone stepped forward. His chest tightened. It was the princess herself. She was dressed in light silver armor that caught the light like water, and in her hands, she carried a long, elegant blade that pulsed with pale blue energy. She descended the steps slowly, each movement graceful but deliberate. The energy field lowered, letting her step onto the platform opposite him, her golden eyes locked on his, unreadable. "This was my idea," she said, her voice carrying easily over the quiet crowd. "When I made my joke, I did not expect you to come this far. Now I will see for myself if you are worthy of it." Daniel tightened his grip on his broken spear. "And if I win?" A faint smile curved her lips. "Then perhaps my words will no longer be a joke." The announcer's voice cut in. "Begin." The princess moved first. She was fast, faster than any opponent Daniel had faced. Her blade struck. In a blur, and he barely managed to block. The force sent him sliding back across the smooth floor. She followed with another strike, then another, each one sharper and more precise than the last. Daniel knew he couldn't match her in speed or reach. He had to make her come to him, to make a mistake. He let her press the attack, sidestepping and deflecting, waiting for an opening. The crowd watched in total silence, the tension heavy in the air. Finally, she lunged with a high slash. Niao ducked under it, stepping in close. His spear moved like a lever, catching her wrist and forcing her blade offline. She twisted, using the motion to spin away before he could follow up. "You fight like no one I've ever faced," she said, circling him. "And you hit harder than anyone I've ever met," Daniel replied. Her eyes glinted and she came at him again. This time her strikes were unpredictable, switching between fast jabs and sweeping arcs. Daniel's arms burned from blocking. His grip began to slip, and a shallow cut appeared on his side where her blade grazed him. The pain sharpened his focus. He waited for her to strike low, and when she did, he stepped aside, using her momentum to hook her arm with his spear shaft. She stumbled. Not much, but enough. Daniel swept her legs with a kick, sending her to the floor. He moved in, pressing, the broken spear tip gently but firmly to her neck. The crowd gasped. For a long moment, neither moved. Her golden eyes searched his face. Then slowly, she smiled. Not mockery, not surprise, but something warm. "You win," she said quietly. The announcer's voice rang out. "The human has conquered all trials." The arena exploded in cheers. Daniel stepped back, offering her his hand. She took it, rising to her feet with a grace that made it clear she hadn't lost all control. Standing close, she spoke so only he could hear. "You may have won the trials, but now comes the real challenge." She turned to the crowd, raising his hand with hers. "He has proven himself worthy," she declared, her voice strong, "and I will honor my word." The crowd roared again, louder than ever. Daniel could feel the weight of what had just happened settle on him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. Whatever came next was going to change both their lives. As they stood in the center of the arena, the sun breaking through the clouds above, Daniel realized something he hadn't before. He hadn't just fought for victory. Somewhere along the way, he had started fighting for her. The arena was still echoing with cheers when Daniel followed the princess out through the private gates. Guards in silver armor flanked them on both sides, their expressions unreadable. The stone halls here were quieter, lit by soft blue lamps. Every step felt heavier now, not because of exhaustion, but because he didn't know what waited at the end. The princess walked ahead, her silver hair swaying gently with each step. She didn't speak until they entered the royal council chamber. Grand circular room with high pillars and walls carved with the history of the Kivar dynasty. Seated at the long table were the council members, all in ornate robes, their eyes sharp and calculating. The eldest counselor rose, his voice cold. "Your Highness, this human has disrupted the order of our trials. No outsider has ever won them, and certainly none has stood where he stands now. You cannot be serious about honoring your words." The princess's gaze hardened. "I do not make promises lightly. Before the court and the people, I said if he survived, I would marry him. He survived all 7 trials." A murmur ran through the council. Daniel felt every pair of eyes on him, weighing him like a piece of merchandise. He straightened, refusing to look away. Another counselor leaned forward. "Do you understand what that means, human? Marriage to the princess binds you to the Kivar throne. You will be a target for every enemy we have, and you will be expected to protect our people with your life." Daniel's voice was steady. "I've been protecting myself since the day I got here. If I can protect her too, I will." The eldest counselor narrowed his eyes. "And if you refuse?" Daniel looked at the princess. Her golden eyes were locked on his, and for a moment, the noise of the room faded. He remembered every trial. Every moment he thought he might die every time he caught her watching. She wasn't just a ruler. She had been testing him for more than strength. She wanted to know if he was the kind of person who stood by his word. He took a breath. "I don't refuse." The princess's lips curved into a small smile, but before anyone could speak, the council chamber doors slammed open. A guard rushed in, armor dented, voice urgent. "Your Highness, enemy ships have breached the outer defense ring. They're demanding your surrender." And the human's head. The council erupted in shouts. The princess rose instantly, her voice cutting through the noise. "Ready the city's shields. Daniel, with me." He followed her through the winding halls until they emerged onto a high balcony overlooking the city. The sky above was darkened by massive warships, their black hulls marked with crimson symbols. The ships hovered like vultures, their weapons glowing. "Who are they?" Daniel asked. "The Dravthar Syndicate," she said, her voice low. "They've wanted my throne for years. Now, with you here, they think they can break us." One of the ships broadcasted a booming voice over the city. "Surrender the human and we will spare your people. Refuse and we burn your city to ash." The princess glanced at Daniel. "If you leave now, you might survive. But if you stay..." Daniel cut her off. "If I leave, they'll still come for you. I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes softened for the first time. "Then we fight together." The city's defense cannons roared to life, bolts of blue energy streaking into the sky. The enemy ships returned fire, shaking the ground. Daniel grabbed a discarded blaster from a fallen guard and took position beside the princess. From the balcony, they could see enemy troops dropping from the ships, their armor black and jagged. The battle was chaos. Explosions lit the streets, and the air was filled with the hum of energy weapons. Daniel fought side by side with the princess, covering her as she cut through the attackers with her glowing blade. At one point, a Dravthar soldier nearly reached her flank, but Daniel tackled him hard, firing point blank. Hours later, the last of the enemy ships retreated, smoking and broken. The city was battered but standing. The people gathered in the streets cheering as the princess and Daniel walked among them. Back in the council chamber, the eldest counselor bowed his head reluctantly. The people have seen you fight for them, human. It seems you are one of us now. The princess stepped closer to Daniel, her voice quiet but clear. When I joked about marrying you, I thought it would never happen. But now, I think it should. Daniel smiled faintly. Guess I'm glad I didn't take it as a joke. The council officially declared their union that night. The city celebrated for days, not just because their princess was safe, but because the human who had beaten the impossible trials had chosen to stay, not as a prisoner but as their protector. And for the princess, the joke she once made in front of a laughing crowd had become something real, something worth fighting for.